We begin the Gemara today, right at the end of Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis, the last two words, I hochi. So this is the middle of an Inyan here. The Gemara is discussing what it said in the Mishnah, the third rule that the Mishnah says when it comes to the Inyan of Yichus, that when you have a case where there's no Kidushin, the Kidushin didn't take effect, and Yesh Aveda, so then the child that's born is a mamzer. And the Mishnah says this is all the Isurei Arayis in the Torah, all the Isurim in the Torah of relatives Arayis, in such a case where the Isur is a Koris, the Kidushin does not take effect. So the Gemara went through different explanations of what the source of this is, that the Kidushin does not take effect. And the final conclusion of the Gemara was that by an Achais Isha, by a person's wife's sister, the Torah clearly says, Leisikach, that there's no Kidushin. And then, in the end of the parasha of Arayis, it says, Kol asher yasem kol atei v'seilev v'nichresu. The Torah puts all the Arayis together in one pasuk, that they're all abominable and archaiv kares. So from this we learn out that we compare the Arayis to each other, that just like a Chais Isha, Kidushin does not take effect, so too by all other Arayis, all other relatives, the Kidushin does not take effect as well. So the Gemara asks on this now, I hochi, that's the source, we're learning it out from this pasuk that compares all Arayis. There's another erva mentioned there in the pasuk, which is not a relative. Afil in nida nami, even a nida. When a person's wife is a nida, it's also mentioned there in the parasha. So we should also say the same halacha, that a woman that's a nida, a kedushin should not take effect. Allah Muhammad Abaye, why did Abaye say Hakoil Moedim? Everybody agrees, Bebal a nida, that if a person has a relation with a woman that's a nida, or vala saita, or a woman that's a saita, a woman suspected to have a relation with someone else, she'ein avlat mamzer, the child is not a mamzer. Based on the rule we're saying here, Kidushin should not take effect because it's included in kol atayeh v'sa'elav v'nichrisu. By nida there's a chi of kares, and the child should also be a mamzer. And it's the Gemara, when it comes to the Isser of Nida, the Torah says, Tihi Nidasa Olav. So we darshan from this pasuk, Afila B'shas Nidasa, that a woman, even in the time when she's a Nida, Tehei Ba Havaya. Tehi means that she can still have Havaya. In the Torah, the term Havaya means Kiddushin, like V'yatze V'haisa, Kiddushin still takes effect. So Nida, even though it's mentioned in that same parsha, but nevertheless, it's different than the other Arayis. Now, if this is the case, so mechti, let's see. When we have here this pasuk that we're comparing all arayis to each other, we could now say that maybe it's coming to say that you should compare all arayis to what the Torah clearly says by a nida, that Kiddushin does take effect. Or or you could compare all the arayis of the Torah to a person's wife's sister, that says, over there the Torah clearly says the Kidushin does not take effect. So if so, my chaz is the makshis lula chaisisha. What's the reason why you're comparing to a chaisisha to say that the Kidushin does not take effect? Actually nida. Why don't you compare it to a nida where the Torah clearly says the Kidushin does take effect? And says the Gemara, kula v'chumra, when we have a hekish and there's a option, there's two choices, either you can compare to be lenient or you can compare to be stringent. The rule is, l'chumre makshinan, we do the hekish, we use the drasha of the hekish to be machmer. That's the rule whenever you have a hekish and there's two options. So here as well, we're makish l'chumre to say that all arayis, the Kiddushin does not take effect. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, I'll bring you another proof, another reason why we make the hekish l'chumre. Asya b'kavachaymer mi yavame. Because we can learn out all arayis with a kavachaymer from yavame. What do we find by a Yavama? Uma Yavama she belav. A Yavama, so she has to get married to her Yavam. And there's a lav, Lesia Eshes Amesa Chutza. She's not allowed to get married to anybody else. It's only a lav, there's no kares here if she does. But nevertheless, there, the halacha by this Yavama is Leitafsi ba Kedushin. If she gets married to someone else, not only she's not allowed, but the Kedushin does not take effect. And Rashi here brings a source, what it says in the Gemara in Yavamis, when it says Loisia Eshes Ames, the word Loisia means that there'll be no Kedushin. So chayve mises, v'chayve krisis, like kol shekain. When it comes to a isra of a erva, which is a chi of mises bezdin and a chi of kares, for sure over there the Kidushin does not take effect. So that's where we see this concept from the kavachayim of Yavama. So the Gemara asks on this: if you're learning it out from Yavama, which is only a lav, ihachi shar chayve lavanami. So all other lavin, why don't we say any isra of a erva, which is a lav? For example, not to have a relation with a mamzer or a nosen, the lavin, which the Mishnah brings up. There are other cases which are lavin, and over there we said that the child born is not a mamzer, and the Kidushin does take effect. Why don't we learn it out from Yevameh that it should not take effect? Omer Rav Papa, so Rav Papa answers, no, we can't learn out from Yevameh. Yevameh is an exception, because Chai ve'lavin behed yiksiv buhu. When it comes to Chai ve'lavin, we can learn from a pasuk clearly that the Kidushin does take effect. Why? The pasuk says, "Kisiyenu leish shtei noshim." Person has two wives. Ha'achas ahuva, va'achas snua. One he loves and one he hates. What does this mean? V'chiyesh snua lefnei hamakim, va'ahuva lefnei hamakim. By the Eibishter, is there such a thing? Hate or love? In other words, that pasuk there comes and says, person has a wife he loves and then a wife he hates, and then there's the b'chayr, and he wants to make the b'chayr of the one that he loves, the one that should be the real b'chayr, even though he's not. If this is just a personal thing of the person, you don't need a special pasuk in the Torah to come and say that you can't go and decide that the son of the one that you love is a b'chayr. Why with the guy with the Eibishter, what you love, what you hate doesn't make a difference. The pasuk doesn't have to clarify that. When it says ahuva and snua in the pasuk, it must be that al pitayda, one is ahuva and one is snua. So ela ahuva means ahuva bin isueha, that she's loved in this marriage, and snua means snua bin isueha, that she's hated in this marriage, which means that al pitayda, that you have a marriage of two wives, and one is a marriage which is mutter al pitayda, and one is a marriage which is also al pitayda. What is that? That's a case where you married a woman which is a isalav, and the Kidushin took effect. She's your wife. Right, so if it's Issachar, that can't be. That we learned out already, that by Issachar there's no Kiddushin. So it must be that this pasuk is talking about an Isalav, to say that even by Isalav the Kiddushin takes effect. The Ka'amar Achmana Kisiyana. Kisiyana means it'll be a Kiddushin. So from here we learn out that by an Isalav the Kiddushin does take effect. Now, Rabbi Akiva, till here we're discussing based on what it said in our Mishnah. But Rabbi Akiva, we had already many times, he disagrees with this whole thing. Rabbi Akiva holds the Amma, Ein Kidushin Toifsim B'chai V'lavin. Even by just the Isser of a lav, Kidushin does not take effect. So Kisihiyeno, this pasuk that says that a person has a wife which is Ahuva and Snua, B'mai Maikim, how does he explain this pasuk? Who's this wife which is Snua? If, according to Rabbi Akiva, even by Isser lav, she's not his wife. The Kidushin does not take effect at all. Says the Gemara, Ba'almana l'kayin gadol. According to Rabbi Akiva, we could say that this is an almana that married a kayin gadol, which is also an isser, but it's not a it's an isser of a lav, but it's an exception. Here, by an almana l'kayin gadol, Rabbi Akiva will agree that the Kidushin takes effect. We had this in the Gemara before. Okay, Rab Simoi explained the Tanya, Rab Simoi oimer. Min hakoil hay Rabbi Akiva oisa mamzer. Regarding all isurim, Rabbi Akiva said that the Kidushin doesn't take effect and the child born is a mamzer. Chutz me'almana l'kayin gadol. Except when an almana marries a kain gadol, even though it's allowed, sharei, over there, amra Torah, the Torah clearly says that what happens as a result, lo yechalo, don't desecrate your children, which means, chilula maisa, the child becomes a chalal, which is a kain that's possible, he can't do the aveda, and so on. But vein oisa mamzeris, the child that's born from this marriage does not become a mamzer. So if the child does not become a mamzer, that means that the marriage does take effect. And this is the case of the snua that the pasuk was talking about. So according to Rabbi Akiva, this pasuk is talking dafka about a kain. This whole the whole siyano l'shtei noshim is only possible when you get to a kain gadol actually. So it's a pasuk that's speaking specifically about a kain gadol that married one wife, which is an almana. But not everybody agrees to this interpretation of Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Although Rabbi Shevov, he said about Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Bo Yuvin Nitzvach al Akiva ben Yosef, let us scream against Rabbi Akiva. What did he say? Any case where al pitated there's an isser of bia, the child is a mamzer, meaning there's no Kidushin, including an almana l'kain gadol. So according to him, what's this case where the pasuk says a person has a wife, achas ahuva, achas snua? What's the snua? There's no the Kidushin never took effect, according to Rabbi Akiva, even by an almana l'kain gadol. So the Gemara, this is Rabbi Shevov, right? So now the Gemara asks on this, even in Rabbi Shevov's opinion itself, there's still room to make a distinction that maybe by an isser of a eser, Rabbi Shevov will agree that according to Rabbi Akiva, the Kidushin will take effect. What's the case of an isser of an eser? Not to marry a mitzri the first 3 generations. So Hanichal Rabbi Shevov, we could still answer according to Rabbi Shevov, Ila Fukim Rabbi Simoy Kasi. if all Rabbi Sheva was saying, when he was saying, let's scream against Rabbi Akiva, he came to exclude from Rabbi Simoi's opinion that Rabbi Simoi held that on Almana L'Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Akiva agrees, and Rabbi Sheva says, no, even on Almana L'Kohen Gadol, the child will be a mamzer. So Shaper. So then we have an answer, as I mentioned, because then you can say that if it's only an Isser of a Esse, the Kidushin will take effect, and that's the snua that the Pasuk's talking about. However, if Rabbi Sheva was just coming and saying his own point, not related to what Rabbi Simoi was saying, and what Rabbi Simoi was coming, Rabbi Sheva, who we are holding over here, Rabbi Sheva, and what Rabbi Sheva was saying over here is that even something which is only a Isser of an Esse, nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva holds if there's an Isser of a Bia, even an Esse, the Kidushin does not take effect. So then, what is this pasuk talking about when it says that the person marries a wife and the Kidushin takes effect and she's a snua? According to Rabbi Sheva, Rabbi Akiva holds if there's an Isser, the Kidushin does not take effect at all. Says the Gemara, even according to Rabbi Sheva, there's still another exception. Answers the Gemara, according to him, if the woman here is a ba'ula, she had a relation with someone else when she was single, and therefore she's a ba'ula. If I marry a kohen gadol, over there, Rabbi Akiva will agree that the Kiddushin takes effect. And one of the things of a kohen gadol is he must marry a basula, not a ba'ula. So this ba'ula, over here, Rabbi Akiva will agree that the Kiddushin takes effect. Rashi here explains that this ba'ula is not a zayna. One of the other things that a kohen is not allowed to marry a woman, which is a zayna. Every woman which had a relation with someone else should be categorized as a zayna. So how could the kohen marry her? Mitzad a differentness, mitzad zayna. Rashi says, no, she's not beged a zayna. A zayna is only a woman that was an eshes, and while she was an eshes, she had a relation with someone else, or something like that. But not when she was a pnuya. When she was not married and she had a relation with someone else, she's not called a zayna, she's called a bu'ula. She's not a basula anymore. In this case, Rabbi Sheva will agree that according to Rabbi Akiva, the Kiddushin will take effect. And the Gemara here brings the Umayshna. What's the difference? Because it's two things. First of all, this is only an Essa. And second of all, this is only an Essa that applies to a Kohen Gadol, not to anyone else. So therefore, because this is a Essa which is more lenient over here, Rabbi Akiva holds that the Kiddushin does take effect. Okay, it's more kolodik than everything else. So this is, again, according to Rabbi Akiva, the pasuk of Achas Ahuva, Achas Nua, is talking about a Kohen Gadol, whether a Manal Kohen Gadol, whether a Bula for a Kohen Gadol. In fact, the Gemara, not going back to the Rabbanon that disagree, V'Rabbanon ad moikila b'chayvi lavin. According to the Rabbanon, so they say, what's the source that by chayvi lavin Kiddushin takes effect? This pasuk, because it says achas ahuva, achas snua, snua is chayvi lavin. Well, how do you know? How do you know to say that the pasuk is chayvi lavin? Noikme b'chayvi yasei. Why can't we say that the pasuk is talking about chayvi yasei? That it's an isser of a esse. So how do you know to include also chayvi lavin here? So what it says, hani chayvi yasei b'maynino. Which chiv esse, which isser of a esse is there in the Torah? Ishteyen mitzriyos is the case. The only esse, isser of a esse that there is for a marriage that could be is the isser of marrying a mitzri. There, the Torah does not say a lav. The Torah says that for the first 3 generations, that you should wait 3 generations to marry a mitzri. The Torah says it as an esse. It doesn't say it as a lav. So if we're going to say what the pasuk is talking about over here is that you marry 2 wives that are mitzriyos, achas ahuva and achas nua. So, but if they're both mitzriyos, shteyen snuos, then both of them are aser. You're marrying both of them are mitzriyos, so it's not one that is allowed and one that's not allowed. Achas mitzris. If you married one wife which is a mitzris, achas Yisraelis, and the other one is a Yisraelis, shtei noshim me'am echad binan. In the lashon of the pasuk, it sounds like it's speaking about 2 wives that come from the same nation. When it says a person has shtei noshim, achas ahuva va'achas tua. Shtei noshim. Why does the Torah say shtei noshim? Shtei noshim sounds like both of these women are from the same nation, meaning they're both Yisraelis. It's not one a Mitzriyis and one a Yisraelis. It's not mashma so in the lashon of the pasuk. So it can't be that either. Now the Rishonim over here add to this that it would be possible to say that they're both from the same nation. They're both Mitzriyos, but one is a 3rd generation Mitzris, and one is a 1st or 2nd generation Mitzris. So the 3rd generation is allowed, and the 1st or 2nd generation is not allowed. And that's the achas ahuva, achas nua. So the Rishonim say from this Gemara, you see, once it comes to a 3rd generation Mitzris, she's a regular Yisraelis. She's not like part of the nation of Mitzris. She's not connected anymore to Mitzris. So it can't be talking about that. Now, what's another option of a esse? Like Rabbi Kiva said, if you're going to say that the pasuk is saying a snua. Why is she snua? Because you're not allowed to marry her with an isser of a esse. Which isser of a esse? Like Rabbi Kiva said, bu'ula l'kayin gadol. You can't say that because miksiv tziyana l'kayin. Is there any indication in this pasuk that we're talking over here, dafka, about a kayin? It says tziyana le'ish, talking about any yid. This whole isser of bull is only by a kayin. So therefore, the only option to explain this pasuk is that it's talking about the isser of a lav. And over here, the isser of a lav, the Kidushin takes effect, but it's snua, because the Torah hates it, it's a isser. And here's the source that for a lav, Kidushin takes effect. Rabbi Kiva, not according to Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Kiva said a pshat in the pasuk that we just explained doesn't make sense, or it's a big deichik to say that the pasuk's talking dafka about a kayin. Says the Gemara, Bal Karchech, he's forced to say, Shafke lekra, that you have to leave the simple pshat of the pasuk to have a dochik of Maiki Nafshei. Rabbi Kiva says that you have to be deichik the pshat in this pasuk, because Rabbi Kiva says that you learn out. Rabbi Kiva has a source, Rashi here brings before, Rabbi Kiva has a source from by a Yevamah where the Torah says V'lo yibana, that there you see that by all lavin Kidushin does not take effect. So Rabbi Kiva has a pasuk that says that for all lavin, or could be even for all other isurim, Kidushin does not take effect. So if so, there's no choice. This pasuk you have to say b'doichik that it's talking dafka about a kayin, and by the isra of a bu'ula dafka over there you say that the Kidushin does take effect. Okay, now going to the last rule that the Mishnah said. What was the last rule of the Mishnah? So the Mishnah says that in a case where there's no Kidushin for this woman, not for this man that she's marrying here, and not for anyone else. Why? Because she's not Jewish. Either she's a Shivcha Kananis or she's a Nochris. In such a case, the Kidushin doesn't take effect at all, and the child that's born, what's the yichus of the child, goes after the mother, and the child will be a guy. That's what it said in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, that is. So the Gemara brings a source for this. Shivcha Kananis minalon. How do I know regarding a Shivcha Kananis that marries a Yid that the child born is going to be a Evet Kanani and doesn't follow the yichus of the father? Amar Avona, Amakra, the pasuk says, Shvulachem Payim Machamoyer, that when this is by the Akedah, the Avram tells Eliezer, sit here with the donkey. Why does it have to say Machamoyer? Am Hadoyme Lechamoyer. What it's saying is that the Evet Kanani, is similar to a Chamoyer. Okay, so therefore, some say that you dashen it, that it's when it says Ima Chamoyer, it's Shulchan Poi Ima Chamoyer, you dashen it Am HaChamoyer. That's an Am that has a similarity to a donkey. And that is just like by a behemoth, there's no Kidushin that could take effect. So too by a goy, by Shivcha Kananis, now we're not talking yet about a goy, we're talking about a Shivcha Kananis, the Kidushin does not take effect. There's the Gemara Ashkra, the Lev Tafsi Ba Kidushin. So this is the source that the Kidushin does not take effect. Vlada Kamaisa Minalan. How do we know the second thing that the Mishnah says that now the child that's born, the yichus goes after the mother and the child is a guy and doesn't go after the father? And says the Gemara Da Makra, the pasuk says by a Shivcha Kananis, Ha'isha v'yiladeh, Shivcha Kananis that gets married to a Eved, the Eved Ivri, so the woman, and her children, Tia Ladina, belong to the master, meaning that her children that are born are misyachis to her, they're a Eved Kanani and they belong to the master. So we see by Shivcha Kananis that her children are like her. Nachris minalan. Now the Mishnah also said regarding a guy. How do we know that a guy there's no kiddushin on makra? Because the pasuk says loy tischaten bam, shouldn't get married to them. So you see over here that there's no kiddushin that takes effect. Now this pasuk is actually written b'negei to the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara is soon going to explain how do we know this regarding all other nations. But it says loy tischaten bam. There's no kiddushin that takes effect. Ashkach midulei tavsi kiddushin. So in this pasuk I see that there's no kiddushin. But Vlada Kemaisa Minalan, how do I know that the child that's born is going to be like the mother, which is a guy, and not like the father? Because the pasuk says that you should not allow your daughter, in the beginning of that pasuk, it's talking about a person's daughter. Don't marry off your daughter to a guy. And why? The pasuk says, Ki yasir es bincha me'acharai. Because then your son is going to be taken away from me. Why? Because the father of this child, the father of the child is going to be a guy, a Ovid Avodah Zarah, and it's going to take this child away from me to serve Avodah Zarah. So what do you see from this? The pasuk there is talking about a case where the mother is a Yid and the father is a guy. And it's saying that over here, the child is bincha. It's the mother's child. Bincha bam Yisraelis. So from here I see the child where the mother is a yid, kari bincha. That's the yichus over there, that's your child. Ve'ein bincha haba menayvedes kechavim kari bincha. But if it would be the other way around, that if it's your son that's marrying a Goyish mother, then the pasuk is not saying don't allow this to happen, because then your child is going to be taken away from you. It's not your child anymore. Then the child that's born is not bincha ela bana. It's a child that the yichus goes after the mother, which is a guy. That's what you see here in this pasuk. Huh? If she's a Yisraelis, then the pasuk is saying ki yaser is bincha, that it is the mother's child. But if the mother's a Canaanist or the mother's a guy, whatever it is, so then it's not bincha anymore. It's the benai. It's mesiachs after the mother, which is a guy. Yeah, here this is the mark of this thing that in Yiddishkeit we go after the mother when it comes to the yichus of the Rebbe once spoke about this more than once. The Rebbe spoke about the Indian of Mi Yehudi countless times, and one of the things that they wanted to recognize someone that has a Yiddish father, that he should be able to come to Eretz Yisrael to recognize him as a Yid, Shalai al Piteira. And so the Rebbe explained that dafke by a woman, there's a certain inyan, even beruchnius, that the amunah that you see by a woman, the connection to a Yiddishkeit, and the fact that she carries the child for 9 months, that dafke she determines the child being a mother, not the father. It's a very powerful thing. Okay, so now this Gemara now says about all of this. We brought all these psukim. One second. First, the Gemara brings Amar Ravina. Ravina also said the same thing that we learn here from this pasuk. Shma mina. From here we see ben bitcha haba menayve kechavim. If you have a grandson and it's a son of your daughter, but the father is a guy, kari bincha. The grandson is considered to be your child, because if the mother is Jewish, then the grandson is also Jewish. Nay, Mekesav Ravina. So the Gemara says, based on this, should we say that Ravina holds Ovid Kechavim ve'Eved haba al Bas Yisrael, a guy or Eved Kanani that marries a Bas Yisrael? So we just said that the child is going to be a Yid. So, but should we say that means that Avlad Mamzer, that the child is Taka a Yid, but the child becomes a Mamzer? If the child will go after the father, so then it's b'chlal not a Yid. It's not shaykh to say a Mamzer, it's not a Yid b'chlal. But over here, that we're saying that the child that's born it's born by Aveda, right? This child this is a case of Yesh Kidushin, and there is no Kidushin here, but there's an Aveda over here. So l'chayre, we had the rule that any time there's a relation, that there's a marriage, and there's no Kidushin, the child is born as an Aveda. With Aveda, that is. So in such a case, the child should be a Mamzer. That was the third rule of the Mishnah. That any time there's no Kiddushin, the child that's born is a Mamzer. So over here, since there's no Kiddushin, the child should be a Mamzer. So the Gemara answers, Nihi, the kosher lehave. No, in this case, actually the child's not a Mamzer. Even though the child is not kosher, but Mamzer lehave. On the other hand, though, the child will not be a Mamzer. Pasal mikri. This child is called Pasal, but not a Mamzer. A Mamzer, we learn out from the Psukim that it has to be similar to other arayis, that there is relatives. Rashi he brings in that parsha, it says, Eishes Av. That's what we learn out from there, that the child that's born from such a kind of marriage, the Kedushin does not take effect, and the child is a Mamzer. But over here, when we're talking about a marriage between a Jewish woman and a guy, where it's not shaykh b'chal for there to be any Kedushin. Not only because of a relationship, because it's a relative. But there's no it's not shaykh b'chal for there to be Kidushin. In such a case, the child that's born is not a mamzer, but the child will be pasal. Okay, now what does it mean that the child is pasal? The Gemara doesn't spell out what this means, but some of the Rishonim say what this means is that this child is pasal to marry a kayan, which means if it's a girl, she'll be pasal to marry a kayan. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the drasha that it said in the beginning. We brought the source that when a guy marries a Yisrael, the Kiddushin does not take effect. What was the source? Like Tischaten. Says the Gemara, b'shiva goyim ksiv. That pasuk it says regarding the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael. Sharu ma'is min alon. How do I know that the same applies also to other nations as well? And says the Gemara, O makra, the pasuk over here says, ki yasir es bincha. Ki yasir es bincha is extra in the pasuk. What do we learn out from Ki Yasir Es Bincha? It comes to say L'Rabbis Kol HaMasirim. It comes to say that any time you have anybody that takes away the child from the Eibishter, is included. Not only the 7 nations, but this pasuk over here is speaking about any other nations of the world as well. Right? So even though the simple pshat of the pasuk there is talking dafka about the Shiva Umais, but nevertheless, from there we can learn out that the same applies all the psukim over there. This is 2 psukim together over there, like the Schaten, then Ki Yasir, it's one pasuk after the other. It all applies benegay to all other nations, and that's why the pasuk is saying Ki Yasir, to tell you this halacha. Fragt the Gemara, Hanichel Rab Shimon, the Darish time of the Kra. According to Rab Shimon, that says whenever the Torah writes something, so you darshan the tam of what the pasuk is saying. Even if the pasuk doesn't tell you clearly the reason, you have to darshan the tam that the pasuk says. So then I could say that when it says in the pasuk over here, ki yasir, it's extra. Why is it extra? Because according to Rab Shimon, when the Torah writes ki yasir, I don't need the Torah to tell me this reasoning. I would understand it on my own. According to Rab Shimon, whenever the Torah says a halacha, what's the Torah saying? It's saying a halacha with a certain reason. And the whole halacha that the Torah is saying is based on a certain reason. Here Rashi brings the source for this regarding a mashkin. When someone owes you money, and you take a mashkin, you take a collateral, if you can't collect the money. So the pasuk there says that if you have an almana, you shouldn't take the mashkin from her. For example, don't take her pillow overnight because she won't have what to sleep with. Now the pasuk doesn't have to give any reason. It's understood from that pasuk, says Rab Shimon, that the whole Isser is dafka regarding an almana because she's poor and she has no pillow of her own. Same thing over here. When the pasuk says you shouldn't allow your son to marry any of the nations of the world, it's understood that what's the reason? The reason is because they're going to come and take you away from the Eibishter because they serve Avodah Zarah. And so therefore, according to Rab Shimon, when it says in the pasuk these words of Ki Yasir, it doesn't have to say it. We dash from the time of the pasuk of our own. It's extra. So now that the pasuk writes it, the only reason it's writing it is so you shouldn't think that this is only regarding the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael, that it applies to everyone else as well. That's according to Rab Shimon. However, according to the Rabbanon, my time. So what's going to be our source? What's the reason? According to the Rabbanon, you could say the exact opposite. You know why the Torah wrote Ki Yasir? Maybe the Torah wrote Ki Yasir to tell you that this Isser only applies to the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael because only they are Ovdei Avodah Zarah to a greater extent, but all the other nations don't serve Avodah Zarah like them, and therefore the Isser of Leites Chaten and the Ki Yasir only applies to them and not to anyone else. So maybe Punkt Fakert, Ki Yasir is coming to say that you shouldn't apply this to all the other nations of the world. So therefore the Gemara says, Makra, so therefore according to the Rabbanan, there has to be a different source. What's the source? The pasuk says, this is by the parsha of Eishes Yefas Toyar. So you bring a woman from war over there. We had it earlier in the Masechta. The pasuk says there the different things that you have to do before you marry her. And you actually have to be megaya her before you marry her. And only afterwards, what do I see from this? The pasuk there continues and says, and then she'll be your wife. The lashon of the pasuk over there is v'haisel l'chal isha. From this I see before you do all the things the Torah says, which includes being a megayer, letafsi ba Kidushin. The Kidushin does not take effect. So this is not talking only about the 7 nations. This is b'chlal by anybody. Now ashkecha on the letafsi ba Kidushin. So in this pasuk I see regarding all goyim that Kidushin does not take effect. V'lada kamaisa minalan. How do I know that the child born will be like her, like the mother? The child will not be a yid. The Gemara says, Makra, the pasuk says over there regarding that case we brought before, Achas Ahuva, Achas Nua. In that pasuk it says, Kisiyano leish. Person has 2 wives, Achas Ahuva, Achas Nua. Then what does the pasuk say? V'yoldu loy, and he gives birth, Yoldu loy banim, from this Ahuva and Snua. What do we learn out from this? It says it starts off with Kisiyano, and then it says V'yoldu loy. If this is a woman where it's possible for Kiddushin to take effect, then the child that's born is loy, will be yours, will be a yid. If the Kiddushin, it's impossible for Kiddushin to take effect. Why? Because she's a guy. Then the child that's born is not going to be your child. The child is going to be, the yichus is going to go after the mother. So this is the source. Says the Gemara, if you're bringing this source from this pasuk, so shivcha nami. So I could say the same exact thing by a shivcha. I don't need any more the source that the Gemara brought before in the beginning of the Amud. It said ha'isha v'yiladel tia ladinel. That's the source that the children of a shivcha belong to her and not to the husband. I don't need that source anymore. We just brought a source over here, kisihiyana v'yoldu, that if there's no kiddushin, then the children are not misyachas to the father, only to the mother, to a guy. So what do I learn from that pasuk? Says the Gemara, And a Chanami, you're right, that pasuk we brought before is not the source for this. What do I learn out from that pasuk when it says by a shufcha kananis that the mother and the children belong to the master? I learn out from that something completely different. Look at the Tanya. We learn out from that what it says in a brayse. The brayse says as follows: So a person says to his maidservant, which is pregnant, Harei at bas chayrin, I'm freeing you, but but the child that you're carrying will still be my evet. Havlat kamaisa. So the child, since she's not pregnant with him, the child is not separate from the mother. The child will be just like the mother and will be free. Divrei Rabbi Yosi Aglili. However, Chachamim say dvarav kayamin, that not what he says could take effect. That only the mother will be free, but the fetus, the child, will still be his evet. Now the Brayse there finishes off. It brings this pasuk mishom shenema. The pasuk says isha v'yiladeh tiladina, that the mother and the children go to the master. So the Gemara explains, my Talmud, what are we learning out of here? So the Gemara explains, the pasuk that's being brought here is not the source for what the Chachamim say. The Chachamim hold that the child and the mother go together. That if you free the mother, the fetus becomes free as well. But what the pasuk is saying is, according to Rabbi Yosi Aglili, it says Isha Viladel. Again, let me just repeat that again. According to the Chachamim, you could separate the mother from the fetus. The mother will go free, and the ibor, the ubar that is, will stay by the master. But Rabbi Yisrael clearly is saying, Isha viladeh tiladeh, that if the master freed the mother, so then the ubar will also go free together. That's what you learn out from this pasuk.